everyone, it's Becky with Icing on Top Becky's Cakes, and today this is a fun cake. We're gonna make a sculpted mountain scene cake, and it's a painted cake, so this is really fun. We're gonna use a couple different techniques. I'm gonna show you how to use the palette knife to apply the buttercream and get some of that really great texture in there, and then I'm also gonna use the regular paintbrush, and we're gonna apply some gel food coloring, thin out that gel food coloring a little bit with some water, and that'll really help us be able to paint on the buttercream. And so I'm going to show you how to use sculpted as well. I'm so glad you're joining me today, so let's begin.
Now I've already frosted the triple layer 6-inch, so I'm going to take these two 4 inches and cut them up for the mountains. So I'm just going to kind of cut them somewhat in half, but I want one side to be a little larger than the other side so that when we carve it, it'll give us more of the mountain shape I'm looking for. Gonna take some of this off the top and sides, and really you just kind of form it however you want, keeping in mind that we're gonna add a little bit of like a cake crumb on top of this to form the mountains more, and you'll see that in just a second here. Now I'm using a serrated knife, and I like to make sure that I'm using refrigerated cakes. They're just easier to carve if they've been in the refrigerator for a little bit. And I'm going to do the same thing with this one, and just kind of stack them and then cut them to the shapes that I want. And then I'm going to add a little buttercream to the top and stick them right up here. Now I have a nice big old scoop of buttercream still in here, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this cake and about half of my 6-inch, and I'm just going to crumble it up in here and make a cake pop type of mixture that'll be really easy for forming the rest of the mountains that I want. Now if you're curious, this was a strawberry and chocolate cake, so I'm still going with those two themes as I build it. So I'm just going to take it out. It's a nice sticky texture, so it helps me form these mountains the way that I want, and you just press it in all together wherever looks good while forming these mountains. Once we get it all pressed in where we want it, then we are going to put it in the freezer for a little bit, about 30 minutes. Now it's nice and firm. I'm going to go ahead and pipe some gray buttercream right on there, and I'm just going to smooth that over first with my offset, and then I'm going to smooth it again with a flexible scraper to get some of those lines out of there, and then I'm going to deliberately place lines with my palette knife, and that'll really give us the definition we want. I like to use these flexible scrapers anytime I have any kind of cake that is not exactly straight up and down. Anytime I have to get in corners or anything, or if it's round, then I like to do that. Now I'm adding another little bit of gray buttercream here. It's less blue than I put the first buttercream in, and that's really just to give us some definition here. So there's a darker blue gray buttercream and then that lighter gray buttercream, and here are the tools that I'm going to be working it with. Now you see I have the palette knives on one side and I have the paint brushes on the other side, and we're going to use the paint brushes last because that's just for the accents afterwards. So we're going to use the palette knives to really give us that great texture here, and I just apply a little bit of buttercream to my palette knife, and then I go in and apply it exactly where I want to while I'm molding these mountains here. Now I'm looking at a picture of a mountain while I do this, so I'm not going straight from memory. You see mountains have different kinds of grooves and different kind of shading, and that's kind of where I'm going with this. Especially I'm going to be highlighting the top with some white later, and that'll really bring out a lot of the lightness in the mountain. Then I can put some darkness in there when we add the gel food colorings, but I'm going to leave those and kind of draw on my cake right now, and I'm just marking off where I want the river to flow through. And that way I know where not to place my other buttercream. But I'm just going to put a little gray here for the river. I'm going to mostly be painting over this, so you're not going to see very much gray once I get the gel food coloring out. But I'm just placing it there so I know right where I want to be painting the gel food coloring, and it gives me a good base on which to start when I start painting my river. And I'm just going to smooth that over with that flexible scraper again. I'm going to pipe on some green buttercream here. You do not need to use this tip when doing it. I just did it because the tip was already in there. But really what we're going to do is we're just going to pull up with our little palette knife here, and we're just pulling that up so it kind of gives the look of foliage and trees in the distance. And so after I do the first row like this, I'm going to come back and I'm going to add some more texture in there with my palette knife so it looks like there's several rows of trees. And do the same thing along the bottom of the river, bring that all the way up to touching where the river is, and just keep working it up and bringing out that texture. And just a little hint, the more you pat with fresh buttercream, the more it's gonna pop out and give you some more of those textured trees there. Putting some gold buttercream down here, and these ones I'm gonna give more of long strokes because there's some long dried grass in this picture, and so I want the strokes to be a lot different. Even though we're gonna paint over this, we want a good base. All right, you can kind of see I have my rough draft over there, but here is the actual picture submitted to me by my friend Anne-Marie, and thank you for that, Anne-Marie. This was a really great inspiration picture for me to work off of. That's a picture in Wyoming, if you're wondering. It's a great place in the national park there. So I put my gel food coloring on my palette, and I thin it out with a little bit of water. You can also thin it out with cocoa butter, but make sure you keep the cocoa butter warm. Otherwise it won't spread for you well. So I just use a little water. I kind of dip my brush first in the water, and then I dip it into the gel food coloring. And if you want it thinner, you can add even more water. Right now it's fairly thick, as you can tell. You can tell in certain spots I have it thicker than others to give the river more texture. And so we're just going to lay quite a bit of this white down, and then we're going to go over with a darker color. Just a teeny bit of gold in there as well, but we're trying to give it a lot of the colors of the background also, so it's reflecting off the water. So I want the mountains and the trees to kind of be reflecting in the water, so I'm just going to add this dark grayish blue. I just kind of mix the colors as I go. So this I probably mix a little bit of super black. I'm using all AmeriColor gel food coloring, so I mixed a little super black, royal blue. Sometimes I have purple. It just depends on the colors you want. It's really fun. So I'm just going to add a little bit of reflection in there, a little more gray, a little lighter blue here, and just make up that water as we go. Some snow to those mountains, which also really gives us some great definition. So I kind of come down in a triangle in certain areas, kind of like where the peak of a mountain would be, and I just work your way down around there, and really brings those mountains to life. And then we're going to add a little more definition by having some lighter gray blue areas in there, and we'll just bring that on down. And then we're going to add some of the shadows to just give it more depth, and we're just going to place those coming down the mountain sides and then down in the crevice in the bottom. And then down here where our dried grass is, we're just going to use some gold coloring, a darker gold, to just bring up all those gold highlights and really make the grass come to life here. A little bit of a bigger brush than the one I just had, and I'm just dabbing out definition for the trees. I'm using a very dark green here, and I'm just gonna just dab it on so that it really also adds texture when you dab it instead of stroke it. You just want to kind of dab it with your finger and just really add that definition. I'm going to also, once I get this all on there, I'm going to focus towards the back tree line, make sure that's all dark so that it gives more depth to this cake here. bring some green down here. And this is gonna be where we'll put our thistles. Now I'm just piping on some tree trunks. I just use a large round writing tip for this and just pipe that on. And then I'm using that little French tip for this area. It's just a really serrated star French tip. And for these fir trees here, we're just gonna bring up those branches. And I love working with buttercream because you just have all these different textures and it really makes it come to life. So it's a very enjoyable medium to work with. And right now I'm piping the stems for the thistles down here to make them pop out more, and then those ones painted in the background just again adds more depth to the cake. And I'm going to use that same tip that I used on the tree, but I'm just going to give it a little dot here, and then I'm going to go in and make some more of the thistles here, and then we're going to be able to put those beautiful purple flowers on them. Small writing tip for this. I'm just going to build up a little bit of buttercream first, and then I'm going to pipe and then pull out while still applying pressure so that it makes these little long points of the flower. I'm just going to pipe that all the way around to make our beautiful thistle. They're beautiful, but you don't want to run through them, right? So we are going to paint on some thorns after this. I'm just going to use a little bit of that white gel food coloring to paint on the thorns once we're done piping on our flowers here. And then we're going to use a little bit of the green food coloring to add a little more depth to the stems themselves. And we're just adding some more definition with our green food coloring, adding some shadows and stuff in our thistles, and then on our tree we're going to add some of those shadows so that it gives our tree some depth there. And when we're done with that, we're just adding a little bit of white food coloring for the thorns, and that'll be the finishing touch for our picture. I had so much fun making this one, and I hope to do some more painted cakes in the future. So please subscribe to my channel and don't miss out on any more of these fun cakes. Thanks for watching.